Calla Voss rode into the night with a baby in one hand and a stolen rifle on her back. Behind her, three Posses swore she'd never see dawn. Calla Voss was as much a fixture of the Dusty Gulch saloon as the sticky, beer-stained floorboards. For 5 years, she'd poured drinks, wiped tables, and listened to the tall tales of miners and cowboys. Her hands were strong, her aim with a bottle was true, and her wit was sharper than a Bowie knife. She knew everyone's name, their favorite drink, and usually their troubles. But behind the easy smile and quick banter, Calla harbored a secret, a weight she carried in her heart like a precious stone. She was more than just a barmaid. She was a survivor, a woman with a past she desperately tried to outrun. The lines around her eyes hinted at sleepless nights and worries she kept locked away. Folks saw a hardworking woman, maybe a little rough around the edges, but dependable. They didn't see the fear that flickered in her gaze when the sheriff walked in, or the way she always positioned herself near the back exit. They certainly didn't know the truth about the baby with the sheriff's mistress, a secret that would soon explode into a desperate fight for survival. Calla was ready, she had to be. The smell of whiskey and stale beer usually hung heavy in the air, but tonight, a new scent overpowered everything: smoke. It started small, a flicker behind the stove, but quickly grew into a ravenous beast. Someone yelled, "Fire!" and the saloon erupted into chaos. Tables overturned, glasses shattered, and the joyful noise turned into screams of panic. Men scrambled for the exits, pushing and shoving in their haste. Calla, ever the pragmatist, moved against the tide. She knew the layout of the building better than anyone. She spotted the sheriff's mistress, Delilah, near the gambling tables, her eyes wide with fear, seemingly forgetting something important. Then Calla saw it, a small bundle lying forgotten on a chair, Delilah's baby. Flames licked at the curtains nearby. Without thinking, Calla knew she had to act. The heat was intense, the smoke thick, but she couldn't leave a baby to burn. She grabbed a wet rag, covered her face, and plunged into the inferno. The heat seared her lungs as she reached the baby. She scooped him up, shielding his tiny face with her body. Getting out was even harder. The roof groaned, threatening to collapse. She stumbled, nearly falling, but righted herself, driven by a primal urge to protect the child. Outside, the air was thick with smoke and the screams of onlookers. Calla coughed, her eyes burning, but her gaze remained fixed on the baby in her arms. He was crying, but alive. Delilah was nowhere to be seen. That's when the thought struck her: she couldn't stay, not with the truth she carried. They would never believe her. They'd see only a barmaid stealing the sheriff's mistress's child. So she acted. She spotted a sturdy-looking horse tied to the hitching post, a rifle in its saddle holster. It was Sheriff Brody's horse. With a surge of adrenaline, she swung onto the horse, clutching the baby tightly, and spurred it into a gallop, leaving the burning saloon and the chaos behind. She was now a fugitive, and a mother on the run. News of the fire spread through Dusty Gulch like wildfire itself, but the story quickly morphed. It wasn't just a fire, it was a kidnapping. Delilah, fueled by grief and perhaps something darker, wailed to anyone who would listen about the heartless barmaid who stole her precious child. The townsfolk, already suspicious of outsiders, were quick to believe the worst. They saw Calla's escape not as a rescue, but as a calculated act of malice. A posse was formed, led by Sheriff Brody, his face grim, his jaw tight. He felt betrayed not only as a lawman but as a man. His horse, his rifle, his child, all gone. Whispers turned to shouts, and soon the entire town was baying for Calla's blood. Posters went up. Wanted for kidnapping, Calla Voss, dead or alive. The reward was substantial, enough to turn even the most honest man into a bounty hunter. Calla, riding hard into the unforgiving desert, had no idea the storm that was brewing behind her. She was alone, hunted, and branded a criminal for doing what she thought was right. The desert was a harsh mistress. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the landscape into a shimmering oven. Water was scarce, and the baby, whom she'd named Hope in her heart, cried often. Calla rationed their meager supplies, prioritizing the child's needs above her own. She knew she couldn't stay on the main trails. Every stagecoach, every rider was a potential threat. She stuck to the dry creek beds and rocky canyons, relying on her knowledge of the land to guide her. At night, she built small fires, careful to shield the light. The rifle was her constant companion, a symbol of both protection and desperation. She learned to hunt rabbits and squirrels, supplementing their dwindling food supply. She sang lullabies to hope, her voice raspy but full of love. In those moments, surrounded by the vast emptiness, she wasn't a fugitive or a kidnapper. She was just a mother, fiercely devoted to her child, fighting for their survival against impossible odds. The weight of her secret pressed down on her, but Hope's tiny hand gripping her finger gave her the strength to keep going. Sheriff Brody rode at the head of the posse, his face a mask of grim determination. He was a man of the law, sworn to uphold justice, but a knot of doubt twisted in his gut. He knew Calla. He'd seen her kindness, her strength. Could she really be capable of such a callous act? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. He had a duty to Delilah, to the town, to the law. But the desert played tricks on a man's mind. He kept seeing flashes of Calla's face, the way she used to smile, the way she always seemed to know what he was thinking. He noticed small details, a broken twig, a disturbed patch of sand, signs that Calla was clever, resourceful. She wasn't just running, she was leading them on a chase, testing them. He had to admit he respected her grit even as he hunted her. But the stakes were too high. He had to bring her in for the sake of the baby, for the sake of Dusty Gulch, and perhaps for the sake of his own troubled heart. He spurred his horse onward, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows across the desert floor. Calla knew they were gaining on her. She could see the dust cloud in the distance, a constant reminder of the relentless pursuit. She needed to lose them, and fast. She reached a narrow canyon, its walls rising high and steep. It was a risky move, a potential dead end, but it was her only chance. She urged the horse into the canyon, the sound of its hooves echoing against the rock walls. Halfway through, she found a small opening, hidden behind a thicket of mesquite. She dismounted, quickly covering their tracks with branches and loose stones. She then climbed a nearby rocky outcrop, giving her a vantage point over the canyon. The posse thundered past, their faces grim, their eyes scanning the landscape. They didn't see the hidden opening, didn't suspect that their quarry was watching them from above. Calla held her breath, clutching Hope tightly. When the posse was far enough ahead, she carefully descended, leading the horse back out of the canyon and onto a different path, one that would lead them toward the mountains. She had bought herself some time, but she knew the chase was far from over. As Calla rode toward the mountains, a memory surfaced, unbidden, a rainy night months ago. Sheriff Brody seeking shelter from the storm in the saloon after a long day, a shared bottle of whiskey, a moment of unexpected connection. One thing led to another. She hadn't planned it, hadn't wanted it, but the loneliness had been a powerful force. The next morning, shame and regret had driven them apart, unspoken promises of silence hanging in the air. She discovered she was pregnant weeks later. Fearful of the consequences, of what it would do to Brody's reputation, she kept it a secret, enduring the pregnancy alone. Delilah's arrival in Dusty Gulch had complicated things further. Brody, drawn to her beauty and charm, started courting her, oblivious to Calla's silent suffering. Calla knew then that she could never reveal the truth. But when she saw Hope in that burning saloon, instinct took over. She couldn't let her child die, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The memory faded, replaced by the harsh reality of her present situation. She had to keep moving, had to protect Hope, no matter the cost. The mountains offered a different kind of danger. The air was thinner, the trails treacherous, and the weather unpredictable, but they also offered refuge. Calla encountered a grizzled old prospector named Jebediah, living in a small cabin nestled in a hidden valley. He was wary at first, but Calla's honest eyes and the sight of the baby softened his heart. He shared his food and water and offered her a place to rest. He didn't ask questions, but he saw the fear in her eyes and the determination in her stance. He knew she was running from something. Later that day, two rough-looking men, bounty hunters, rode into the valley, flashing a wanted poster. Jebediah feigned ignorance, directing them further up the mountain on a wild goose chase. After they left, he warned Calla, "They'll be back, you need to move on." Calla knew he was right. She thanked him for his kindness, knowing she couldn't risk putting him in danger. As she rode away, she wondered who else she would meet on this perilous journey and who she could truly trust. The world was full of both angels and devils, and telling the difference could mean the difference between life and death. High in the mountains, Calla encountered two more bounty hunters, these ones more persistent and less easily fooled than the first. They cornered her near a mountain stream, their eyes glinting with greed. "Nowhere left to run, barmaid," one sneered, leveling his rifle. Calla held Hope close, her heart pounding. She knew she couldn't outrun them. She had to fight. She placed Hope gently behind a large boulder, then grabbed her rifle. "Stay back," she warned, her voice steady despite her fear. The bounty hunters laughed, but Calla's eyes were cold, her aim true. She fired a warning shot, kicking up dust near their feet. They hesitated, surprised by her accuracy. Using the terrain to her advantage, she moved quickly, firing again and again, forcing them to take cover. It was a desperate battle, but Calla was fighting for her child, and she wouldn't back down. Finally, with a well-aimed shot, she disabled one of their horses. The bounty hunters, realizing they were outmatched, retreated, vowing revenge. Calla knew they would be back, but for now, she and Hope were safe. She retrieved Hope, her hands trembling, and whispered, "We're okay, baby, we're okay." Back in Dusty Gulch, Sheriff Brody stared at the charred remains of the saloon. He found a small, intricately carved wooden horse near where the baby had been sleeping, a toy he'd given Calla years ago, a small token of affection he'd almost forgotten. It was out of place, incongruous with Delilah's expensive tastes. He also spoke to a few townsfolk who had been hesitant to come forward before. They recounted seeing Delilah arguing with a man behind the saloon the day of the fire, a man they didn't recognize. Another mentioned seeing Delilah carelessly flicking a lit cigarette near the hay bales behind the stove just hours before the fire broke out. These small pieces of information didn't fit the narrative of Calla as a cold-blooded kidnapper. They painted a different picture, one of a desperate woman trying to protect something precious. Brody felt a growing sense of unease, a gnawing suspicion that he had been wrong, that he was hunting an innocent woman. He had to find Calla, not just to bring her to justice, but to uncover the truth. The weight of his badge felt heavier than ever. Calla reached a small, abandoned mining town, hoping to find some supplies. As she searched through the dilapidated buildings, she heard a familiar voice. "Calla, is that you?" She turned to see Sheriff Brody standing there alone, his face etched with weariness. He looked different, uncertain. "Brody," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She instinctively shielded Hope, bracing herself for the inevitable confrontation. "I'm not here to arrest you," he said, his voice low. "I just want to understand. Tell me what happened, Calla." "Tell me the truth." Calla hesitated, years of fear and distrust warring with a desperate need to confide in someone. "They think I kidnapped her," she said, her voice cracking. "But she's—" "She's what, Calla?" Brody pressed, his eyes searching hers. "She's my daughter, Brody," Calla confessed, the words tumbling out like a dam had broken. "She's our daughter." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Brody's face registered shock, disbelief, and then slowly understanding. The pieces were finally falling into place. "But Delilah," Brody stammered, confusion clouding his face. "She said." "She lied," Calla interrupted, her voice firm now. "She knew all along, I think she wanted me gone, maybe even Hope, too." Just then a gunshot rang out. Both Calla and Brody ducked for cover. Delilah emerged from behind a dilapidated building, her face twisted with rage, a pistol in her hand. "You ruined everything," she screamed. "You should have stayed quiet, Calla. Now you'll both pay." It turned out Delilah had been deeply in debt to some dangerous men, and the saloon fire was meant to be an insurance scam gone wrong. She had planned to disappear with the money, leaving the baby behind. Calla's sudden rescue had thrown a wrench in her plans, forcing her to improvise and frame Calla for kidnapping. Brody, realizing the full extent of Delilah's deceit, drew his own gun. Delilah put the gun down. It's over. The stage was set for a final, deadly showdown. Delilah fired again, the bullet whizzing past Brody's head. He returned fire, forcing her to take cover behind a crumbling wall. Calla, shielding Hope, knew they couldn't stay there. Delilah was desperate and dangerous. Calla saw an opportunity. While Brody kept Delilah occupied, she crawled through a broken window into a nearby building. She emerged on the other side, circling around behind Delilah. "It's over, Delilah," Calla said, her voice clear and strong. Delilah whirled around, her eyes wide with panic. She pointed the gun at Calla, then at Hope. "If I can't have her, neither can you." Before Delilah could fire, Brody tackled her to the ground. The gun went flying, landing a few feet away. Calla rushed to Hope, pulling her close. Brody struggled with Delilah, finally managing to disarm her completely. He stood up, breathing heavily, his gaze fixed on Delilah's defeated face. The long chase was finally over. The truth was out. And justice, however delayed, would finally be served. The truth spread through Dusty Gulch like the scent of rain after a long drought. Some townsfolk were ashamed of their hasty judgments, others remained skeptical, but the evidence was undeniable. Delilah confessed to her crimes, implicating her partners in the insurance scam. She was taken away to face justice. Calla was exonerated. The wanted posters were torn down, replaced with a quiet respect. Brody, grappling with the revelation of his daughter, struggled to find the right words. He knew he had a lot to make up for. He offered Calla his hand. "Come home, Calla, let us start over together." Calla looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her arms. The decision was hers. Could she trust Brody? Could she forgive the town that had so readily condemned her? Could she build a new life from the ashes of the old? The answer, she knew, lay in her heart and in the trusting gaze of her daughter. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Calla felt a flicker of hope. A real hope. Calla looked into Brody's eyes, seeing the sincerity there, a reflection of her own yearning for a stable life for Hope. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her weathered cheek. "Yes, Brody, we'll come home." The return to Dusty Gulch was not a triumphant parade, but a quiet reconciliation. Calla still carried the scars of her ordeal, the memories of the harsh desert, the constant fear. But she also carried something new, the unwavering support of Brody and the growing affection of a community slowly learning to trust again. Life wasn't perfect. There were whispers, doubts, and the ever-present reminder of Delilah's betrayal. But Calla had hope, and she had Brody, and that was enough. She took a job teaching the town's children, sharing her love of reading and her hard-won wisdom. Brody proved to be a loving father, building a cradle for Hope and spending hours playing with her. Years later, as she watched Hope running through the fields, her laughter echoing through the valley, Calla knew she had made the right decision. The fire had taken much, but it had also revealed the strength of her spirit, the depth of her love, and the enduring power of hope. The desert had tested her, but it had also given her a home.